Congressman David Valadao, thank you so much for joining us in studio today. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
So you are running for re-election to the 22nd Congressional District. Let's talk a bit more about what re-election is going to look like. What work do you think remains undone? What are your top 3 priorities this time around?
Well, I mean, for me, it's always the same priorities. Water, even though we've had some success on water in legislation in the past, we need to do more. We're always struggling on that front here in the Valley, and so water is one of the first and foremost. Immigration's always been something I've worked on. Obviously, dynamics change a little bit with so much attention on the border. Border security is going to be a big component of that, but guest worker programs and things like that are also something that are very important to me. And then just general making sure that we keep the Valley strong, making sure we continue with our energy production on all forms, especially here in the Kern County with oil production being a major driver for the economy and something that creates a lot of jobs, but also even on some of the new fronts that are coming out with solar and others that are coming along. Trying to be supportive with just the general population any way I possibly can.
And Congressman, I know border security is very big. We will touch on that a bit more later. But in 2022, your congressional race, as you're very well aware, it was one of the most expensive and competitive in the country. Do you see a replay of that?
It's really hard to say. There's so much at play. I would expect that there's going to be a major, it's going to be a major race like it always is. But I guess as a candidate that's on TV getting beat up, I would hope it wouldn't be.
I mean, I've talked to leaders within both parties, and it sounds like both sides are ready to invest what they need to win this seat. How much money do you think it's going to take to win re-election? Again, what's that competition going to look like?
I mean, it's really hard to know what it's going to play out to be. I mean, we've seen things as low as $5 million on both sides, and I've seen things as high as $15 million on both sides, or with the $30 million being the total. Hopefully it's not too much. I know TV stations would prefer a little bit more, but as the person that's getting attacked, it's not always fun.
Back in 2022, our anchor Jim Scott asked you, can you win this race without Trump in your corner? This time around, Speaker McCarthy is also no longer, quote unquote, in your corner. How tough would re-election be? Again, how does this kind of change your campaigning or change your future without Speaker McCarthy in the House?
Well, McCarthy's not in the House, but he's still in my corner, and I still talk to Kevin quite a bit, and he's still a close friend, and he's always going to be supportive. As far as my race in general, I mean, I've won before Speaker McCarthy was a speaker when he was just the majority whip. I've won with him being the minority leader, and so we've been able to be successful under now 4 different speakers, and hopefully we'll have that same opportunity again. But obviously Kevin is still out there and still someone I can lean on for as much help as I could possibly need.
And quickly on the topic of Mr. McCarthy, I'm curious, did you try to talk him out of resigning? What did that process look like when there were rumors and speculations about him potentially leaving?
No, and it's not something I had a lot of dialogue with him, but when members are making decisions based for their careers or even major decisions that affect their livelihood and their futures and whatever they want to do, I don't get involved in that. It's not my place. I mean, obviously I would love to keep him in the House. I think he was a huge asset for us here in the Valley, and I think he'll be greatly missed. But he's got to do what's best for him and his family, and I totally support him in those decisions.
How have the dynamics up on DC changed with this transition to a new speaker? What is Speaker Johnson doing that's potentially different from what Speaker McCarthy has done in the past?
I mean, Speaker Johnson is learning the role. And you have to understand that to get to the point where you're speaker, normally you go through the process of working up through different positions within leadership, and you build that team up, I guess, if it makes sense. And Speaker Johnson skipped quite a few steps, and so he's learning the role. And I think he's doing a great job, especially when you give him the fact that he's really didn't have a position of leadership before other than just a minor position in House leadership. But now to be able to build the team, help with the fundraising, help with manage the floor, and do all the different things that he has to do. I mean, he's doing the best he possibly can. I think he's stepped up and he surprised a lot of us, but he's got a lot of work to do.
Are you happy with the state of Congress right now? And I ask this because when the whole motion to vacate was happening, you and I had a few conversations, and you expressed frustration that you, quite frankly, weren't able to govern as a party, as Congress.
Well, I was obviously frustrated because of a few people. There was 8 members of Congress who decided that they wanted to work with all the Democrats and throw the House into chaos. That was very frustrating. Now, as far as Congress itself, I mean, you've got a Republican House, a Democrat Senate, and a Democrat in the White House. you're always going to have issues. It's always going to slow down the process of legislating and doing things. It ends up being where the goal is to really hold back on some of the things that the president was trying to do, namely a lot of those really big spending projects that at this time, with us being $34 trillion in debt, probably isn't the best idea. And then also get him to focus on some of the issues that I think the American people want him to, making sure we keep inflation under control, make sure we secure the border, make sure that we get crime under control. We need families to feel safe. I mean, all those different types of things. And so we are seeing some of that. We put a lot of pressure on the White House on inflation. We prevented them from taking on any new major spending packages, but we also now have a lot of pressure that we're putting on him with the border. You're seeing a lot of Democrats acknowledge that the border is a huge problem. And the president himself the other day, when asked walking out of an event if the border was secure, he acknowledged that it wasn't. I mean, Mayorkas is the only one that seems oblivious to what's going on there, and sadly, he's the one in charge of it.
Let's talk more about the border. Where exactly do you stand on border security? I know you support the guest workers program and streamlining the process, but more specifically, what is border security going to look like under another term?
Well, there's no 100% ever on a border security. I mean, we have people in prison who escape. The reality is what's going on the border. There's always going to be issues. But making sure that we have the tools, make sure we have the people, and make sure we have the rules in place that allow our border to be as secure as possible. If it means building barriers where they make sense, absolutely. If it means buying technology like autonomous cameras where that makes sense, do that. Where it means hiring more border patrol agents, we need to do that. Where it means changing the rules to make sure that we adapt on the asylum process so we don't have every single person in the world coming to our border and just claiming asylum, and then basically giving them all the tools they need to hang out in our country for the next 10 years while they await a court date. Obviously that's wrong, and so we need to make sure that we get those adjudicated as quickly as possible and processed, because we need to have an asylum process for those who really need it. But right now it's just being abused, and we need to fix those rules to make sure it's not anymore.
To be very clear, should everyone, regardless of how they came into the U.S., be offered some pathway to citizenship?
No, they shouldn't, because there are people that have come across the border to do us harm. And we know for a fact there are people who are on terrorist watch lists who have snuck into our country or have been caught at our border. And I think that's a huge problem, and that needs to be prevented. And to allow someone who is on a terrorist watch list to be given some path to citizenship is asinine, and we just can't have that. But there are people out there that have come here because our process has been broken, especially the guest worker program and others, where they've played a vital part of our economy here in the Valley with agriculture. But construction, we're struggling with high home prices. 80% of the workforce in construction is undocumented. Are we just going to send everyone home and then stop building completely? I mean, what will that do to home prices? What will that do to construction costs? And we have to have some reasonable approach to this.
We may have another Trump administration. I'm curious, under that potential administration, would you stand by and follow former President Trump's agenda in handling border security, no matter what?
No, it just depends on the policy. I mean, there's things that I've supported and there's things that I haven't supported. And obviously I've had that same position with President Biden. I've had that position with President Obama and President Trump in the past. But yes, I've always been supportive of securing our border, making sure that we have policies in place to secure our border in an efficient way that makes sense.
On the topic of former President Donald Trump, you voted to impeach him. Are you concerned you could face retaliation for your vote again under another Trump administration?
I can't sit there and worry about those types of...
But are you concerned? Is that concern there?
It's not something I spend any time on, because I have to focus on my district and continue to work to the best of my ability. Now, if someone wants to take retaliation, then that's up to them, but I can't worry about that.
Looking back on that vote, do you have any regrets?
I don't look back on any of my votes and ever second guess myself. I made the decision I made, and I move forward and continue to look forward.
Would you accept a Trump endorsement, Congressman?
I'm not going to get involved in any of the presidential stuff at this time. Right now, my focus is to work really hard in my district to represent my district the best of my ability.
I understand, but I do also want to ask who you would endorse for president.
I'm not getting involved in anything at the presidential level now or until Election Day. My goal right now is to work as hard as I possibly can to get through Election Day, focus on my district, and do my best to get elected and represent the people that are my neighbors.
Let's talk a little bit more about your campaigning. I know you have a lot of incumbent duties as well, but in terms of your reelection bid, In what ways can constituents here in the Valley expect to see you? I know you're out here this week interacting with folks, right? But when can they expect to see you? In what ways can they expect to see you?
Well, I'm always in the district when I'm not stuck in DC, and obviously traveling across the country is not easy, but especially when we had the whole speaker fight, that changed our schedule quite a bit, and we went almost 10 weeks straight of being in Washington, DC. I still come home every weekend. My family lives here, so I obviously want to come home, see my family, see my constituents. This is where I live, and it's my home. But because we've been stuck so much in DC, we've done lots of different things. Our teletown halls is one of our most powerful tools that we use very, very well. We've reached tens of thousands of people and continue to communicate with folks that way. Our mail program, social media, all the different things. But even on the district, when I'm out and about, I've been here in Kern County, and this is my third time this week alone. And I spend some time in Tulare County and Kings County, and I'll still be around the Valley every opportunity I have.
And here in the Valley, the 20th Congressional District, the race for that seat left vacated by former Congressman Kevin McCarthy is also a very big deal here. There's a special election as well, at least for the full term, where there are many candidates, 11 total, who have thrown their name in the ring. Who would you endorse for that seat to be a fellow congressman with you here?
I actually have a few friends on that list, and so I've decided to stay out of that. Just like I don't get involved in a lot of other races. From presidential on down, you won't see me endorsing a lot just because I focus on my district. But Vince Fong, Sheriff Mike Boudreau have all been supporters of mine in the past. A few of the others I don't know as well. I mean, Stan Ellis is a close personal friend of mine, but he's already come out and endorsed Vince Fong. But I've got quite a few friends in that race, and I talk to all of them and communicate with all of them. Happy to be helpful to any one of them, but I'm not picking a favorite.
What are your hopes for that district, again, given that typically CD22, CD20, those representatives have had a very close relationship up in Congress?
I've always had a close relationship with all my colleagues, some on both sides of the aisle. I work really well with some of the districts I border, like Jim Costa up north, Salute Carbajal just to the west of us, Jimmy Panetta, even people who are running for Senate now, people like Katie Porter, who I work with. I've had a great relationship with Kevin McCarthy over the years. I've had a great relationship with Devin Nunes when he was there, Connie Conway, who replaced him. My goal is to make sure whoever's in that seat cares just as much about their district as I do about mine.
On the topic of Mr. McCarthy, recent conversations in the wake of his resignation has been, what does it mean to be conservative? I mean, here within the Valley, you see a lot of people say, he wasn't conservative enough, right? To you, Congressman, what does it mean to be a conservative? And second part to that question, do you say you are conservative enough? Yet, can you be centrist enough to win those Democratic and Latino votes in your district?
No, I absolutely believe you can be conservative. And what does it mean to be conservative? I mean, there's obviously a lot of definitions, and the definitions have changed independent on the person. But for me, what it means is to be as conservative as you possibly can while moving the ball forward. And that's something that I think Reagan talked about quite a bit. He wanted as much as he possibly could, and if you only got 50% of what you were asking for, or 80%, and you were moving the ball in the right direction, you were a conservative. And I think that's where I'm at, and I think that's where a lot of members are at. Our goal is we want to make sure that we can do as much as we possibly can to be as conservative as we can with the taxpayers' resources without hurting them. And that's something that in some of these debates that we have over appropriations and government funding projects, and those are things that we have to take into consideration when those decisions are being made.
So given that definition, you have won over those Democratic Latino votes in the past, but how do you retain them? How do you guarantee them for 2024 as well?
I don't think the average person at home sits and thinks, well, this is a conservative decision or a liberal decision. They look at it as, how does this affect them? And so knowing that there are a lot of programs out there that benefit a lot of folks, but a lot of these folks who are on these same programs, they see a lot of waste, they see a lot of fraud, and there's a lot of complaints. And so knowing that we're paying attention, we're out there visiting with these facilities, visiting their places where they're getting their services, and getting to understand that so we can try to root that out and protect those programs for those who most need it is a priority for me. And I think people appreciate that, and that's probably why I get a lot of their support. They know I'm looking for ways to save money, but they also know that I care about them and want to do the best I can for them.
Democratic candidate Rudy Solace is challenging you in your re-election bid. You faced off with him in the general election last time in 2022. Do you view him as your top opponent this time around?
I don't know who my top opponent is. I mean, I never really got a chance to stand on the stage with him. As you probably well know, a couple days before the debate, he decided that he didn't have the courage to stand on the stage with me. So a little depressing to see, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And his most recent ad is all about what he's done for the immigrant community here and the farm workers, whether that be through a minimum wage increase, guaranteeing overtime pay, etc. Tell us why you are better suited for CD22, Congressman, that population Rudy Solace is targeting.
Well, the one is if you actually went out and talked to some of the farm workers and you got to listen to them about the overtime and some of the minimum wage stuff that he brags about, he actually hurt them more than anything, because the resources, the guys that were getting some, they were getting some overtime and they were getting some longer hour days so they can make a little bit more money. That has all been cut back now. I mean, where the market is and where you can justify the cost what it would take to put fruit into a basket and be able to get it to market, and the competition they have to do on a world market, has put them in a competitive disadvantage. And so a lot of the same farm workers who I'll go out and visit and talk to, and because I'm one that speaks Spanish and could understand them and have that type of dialogue with them, they'll complain right away and say these new laws have actually hurt us and they've put us at a disadvantage, and now they have to go look for second jobs to try to make up that income. And it's frustrating for them. Now, as far as who is better to represent the district, I mean, obviously someone who understands the issue, has worked those issues, and has been a part of those communities in my entire life, and it's what I do. Instead of just a photo op in a pickup, I've lived my entire life on a farm, very much active in the farming community, understand how those issues work and how they impact the workers, the businesses, and how that brings those resources back. There's no one more qualified for that than me.
And last topic for me, Congressman, you said in the past that you don't believe the 2020 election was overthrown, or excuse me, that you would vote to certify the results of the 2020 election. In 2025, one of the first tasks that Congress faces is certifying the results of the 2024 election. Will you vote to certify the results of the election no matter what?
I mean, now you're asking me to speculate on something I have no idea on. Obviously, when we look back at all the decisions I've made, I stand by my decisions, and I know I've been in a lot of tough elections. I've seen things that are fraudulent, and I know there is fraud out there, but I can't imagine a situation where I don't. But we have to make sure that I'm not going to put myself in a position where I lock myself into a position. And if there is actual fraud out there, I can't support that, and I will not stand by that. But we have to make sure that there are legitimate and fair elections, and I'll support that and continue to support that. And if I take heat for it, that's fine. But the reality is I'm not going to speculate on a decision that's, still a year out.
You have to see the evidence first. Okay. And one more thing, Congressman, I know you said you're not going to talk about the presidential election at this point in your candidacy, but I have to ask, if it comes down to another Biden-Trump rematch, is there a possibility you would endorse President Biden over Trump?
There is no chance I will support President Biden. That's never going to happen. But the reality is I'm not going to get involved in anything presidential at this time. So.
I understand. That is it for me, Congressman. Thank you so much for